we have some beautiful weather, so I'm going to introduce the panelists that we have here to join us today. On my left, we've got Robin Kelly, the Gary B. Nash Professor of American History at UCLA, who's awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship in 2014. He's published several books focusing upon African American history and culture. He's the author of Thelonious Monk, The Life and Times of American Original. He's received several honors, including Best Book on Jazz from the Jazz Journalists Association. His most recent book, which you should check out, is Africa Speaks, America Answers, Modern Jazz in Revolutionary Times. Please welcome Robin Kelly. So Robin, would you like to tell us a little bit about Erroll?
Yeah, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm actually going to give you his life story, but really try to situate him in the 1950s and the fact that we're talking about 60 years ago, today actually, was that conference, that concert rather. Keep in mind that when that recording was made, Erroll Garner was a giant among a sea of giant pianists. And this is like a renaissance of pianists, of different styles and directions. I mean, this is a period of Herbie Nichols and Thelonious Monk, and Ahmad Jamal, and certainly Dave Brubeck, was making a lot of money. People like, Duke Ellington and Count Basie were still performing and still really relevant. So every direction you can imagine, Lenny Tristano, they were all going in this direction. The other thing is that the music was going through certain transformations. I mean, Charlie Parker had died earlier that year. The following year, Art Tatum died, representing real breaks in the direction of the music. And so here's Erroll Garner, who embodies both the kind of future modernism as well as practices that are associated with past pianists like, Earl Hines and Tatum in some ways, but he has his own thing. And in some ways, musicians loved him because of his orchestral approach to the piano, his percussive style, his sense of timing. They loved him. The critics, after this record became the best-selling live recording, jazz recording in history at that point, the critics, embraced him. But if you read the press on Erroll Garner, so much of the emphasis is on the fact that he could not read or did not read, as if somehow that was really relevant, that he sat on a phone book. I mean, in other words, just really trivial stuff, and not about the essence of his music. Now, musicians are not saying that. They're saying something very different. And I just want to mention that just briefly because in many ways, by 1957, Erroll Garner is on TV talk shows. He's a star. He wins almost all the major critics polls, right? The international critics polls. And then by the mid-60s, he kind of fades away and disappears. Why that's the case we could talk about later, but I think a lot of it has to do with a couple of things. One is that he and his manager, Martha Glazer, decided to take on Columbia Records. Columbia Records in 1960 began issuing unreleased recordings, unauthorized recordings, and he sued them. And he won, but that battle, I can't get into it, but basically after that happened, all those quaint stories about Erroll Garner as like the idiot savant but brilliant pianist fell by the wayside compared to what the black press was saying. He was a dignified African-American artist who was fighting for his right to have control over his art. And at that point, as Martha Glazer said many years later, it became difficult for him to make as much money as he did. So the stories of him making millions and millions of dollars are kind of overrated because the companies made millions and millions of dollars off of Erroll Garner. So we could talk more about that, and I just want to just leave you with one other thought, and that is, keep in mind that the music is going in many directions, but it's also responding to the crisis of the times. Exactly 20 days before the concert, Emmett Till's body was dredged out of the Tallahatchie River in Mississippi. That's the context in which he's making happy music, a music that both is a claim to the spirit of a people trying to change America, one that he was very much a part of. And so when people really enjoying that music, they're also thinking about what had happened just 20 days before that.
Robin, thank you. Thank you.